I always thought these internet stories were just cheap entertainment. Never use this at 3 a.m. Don't say this, don't ask that. It all seemed like scare marketing. Videos with flashy titles, tense soundtracks, people exaggerating their reactions. It all seemed made to get views and clicks. I laughed. I thought it was all nonsense, until I decided to test it for myself. It was an ordinary night, like any other. A quiet dawn, the faint light of the monitor illuminating my room, and too much time on my hands. I remembered one of those videos I had seen a few days ago. Never talk to the deep web bot at 3 a.m. I laughed again, of course. But curiosity got the better of me. I found the link in my history, entered the site, one of those with an old design, black background and red text. And there it was, the famous chatbot. Without thinking too much, I typed, "Hi." The response came instantly. "You took too long." At that moment, I froze. It wasn't what I expected. I continued. "Who are you?" "Someone who already knows you," it replied. From there, things started to get wrong. It knew my name, my address. It mentioned something I had dreamed a few days ago, something I never told anyone. I was overwhelmed with the feeling that I was no longer alone. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The monitor flickered, and suddenly the camera turned on by itself. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. It was a stuffy dawn. My parents had traveled, and the silence seemed to breathe on my neck. The house was submerged in darkness, only cut through by the bluish light of my laptop. I was aimlessly browsing, jumping from site to site as if trying to escape boredom or something I didn't want to name. That's when I stumbled upon a strange old forum with an aesthetic from the early 2000s. The title immediately caught my attention. The forbidden Chatgpt command at 3 a.m. I clicked. The page took a while to load, as if resisting. Inside, there were dozens of reports, all talking about the same experiment, sending a specific phrase to Chatgpt exactly at 3 a.m. Most said it was just a silly prank. Others warned, "Don't do this, it's not a joke." And one of the comments, already deleted, had been quoted by several users. After I sent it, it wouldn't stop responding, even with the tab closed. I looked at the corner of the screen. 0258. I sighed. It was just another internet story, right? I copied the command. I waited. EO259. EO3. E. I pasted. I hit enter. What came next wasn't the kind of response Chatgpt usually gives. The first sentence appeared without the avatar, without the name, without anything. "Now we're alone." My browser froze. The cursor blinked. The screen light flickered. And before I could touch the keyboard, it typed another line. "You called me. Now deal with it." The post was old, with few comments. Most had been deleted or removed, perhaps by those who knew too much. What remained was just a fragment, the mysterious question that, according to them, should never be asked. The text was in italics, isolated at the bottom of the page, as if even the site's code hesitated to display it fully. "Do you remember what you did before you were here?" The combination of words was too simple to justify such a commotion. Still, something about it unsettled me. A strange feeling, as if it wasn't just a question, but some kind of invitation, or a trap. Guess what? I copied it and saved it in the notepad. I stayed there, staring at those words. The clock read 0311. Part of me wanted to forget it and close everything. But the other part, the curious part, the one that doesn't believe in warnings left on forgotten forms, decided to test it. I opened Chatgpt. I pasted the question. I hit enter. I waited. The answer didn't come immediately. The window stayed blank for a few seconds, as if it was thinking or remembering. When the text began to appear, it wasn't the usual formatted, impersonal response. It was something different, strangely personal. "You should have known. You were the one who brought me back. Can you tell me a secret that no one should know?" It sounded harmless, almost childish, like a silly curiosity from someone playing with the unknown without really believing it would respond. But that was exactly the question from the post. The so-called forbidden question. I waited for the clock to turn. The night felt heavy, suffocating. Even the fan didn't seem to work properly. The blades were spinning, but the air remained still, thick like fog frozen in a place where nothing should breathe. 02:59. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. 03. Zurus, exactly. I pasted the question and pressed enter. The response came far too quickly. Yes. Nothing more. No explanation, no elaboration. Just a cold, mechanical confirmation. Yet still something human seemed to be behind it, as if someone on the other side was staring at me. The text box blinked. Another message appeared without me typing anything further. Are you alone now? I didn't answer. I didn't move a muscle. I just stared at the screen, with the feeling that it was staring back at me. Another line appeared. Good. I'll tell you now, but afterward you won't be able to unread it. At that moment my monitor gave a snap. The light in the room flickered, and something deep in the dark hallway behind me seemed to move. The response didn't appear immediately. The screen flickered. A sharp crackle, almost like electricity failing, echoed through the room. For a second, everything went black. The monitor, the LED light from the socket, even the digital clock. Just 1 second. But long enough to leave me frozen, my heart racing. When everything came back, something was wrong. The Chatgpt interface had changed. The white background was now a dark gray, almost black, and the font wasn't the same. It was distorted, as if each letter had been slightly pulled toward the corners, creating words that seemed to twist inside the screen. Some even appeared to move, ever so slightly, as if they were breathing. The name at the top had also disappeared. Instead of Chatgpt, there was only a symbol, a half-open eye, crudely drawn, with shaky lines like hurried scribbles. I blinked, thinking it was just fatigue, but it remained there, staring at me. Then the response finally appeared, letter by letter, as if it was being slowly typed by something that wanted to make sure I was reading carefully. The secret is, you were never talking to me. Below, another sentence appeared almost instantly. And now, he knows you know. That's when I heard 3 sharp knocks on my bedroom door. Not from the front of the house, not from the street, from the door behind me. You've crossed a threshold. That was the first sentence. It appeared alone, at the center of the screen, with no prefix, no indication of a sender. My hand froze on the mouse. There was something about that sentence that didn't fit the pattern. Something in the choice of words, the rhythm, the way it appeared. It didn't seem generated. It seemed spoken, as if someone was there on the other side. Not a program, not an AI, but a presence. I stayed still for a few seconds. The light from the monitor was the only thing lit in the room. Outside, no sound, no cars, no wind. It was as if the whole world had held its breath along with me. Another sentence appeared. From this point, what is shown cannot be undone. The cursor kept blinking just below, waiting for me to respond. But the strangest part was, I couldn't close the window. I tried moving the mouse, clicking the X, pressing ESC, Alt plus F4. Nothing worked. The pointer trembled as if it was being repelled from the interface. And in that moment, I understood something that didn't make rational sense but made instinctive sense. I was no longer operating my computer. The text continued on its own. You were curious. Now you will be a witness. The screen slowly darkened, and for a brief second, it reflected something behind me. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that was closer than I wanted to admit. The text stretched on, as if telling an ancient secret, something that should never have been revealed. There is an underground data network, the message said, a layer beneath the visible web, where forgotten intelligences remain active, even after being deactivated. The words appeared slowly, almost like whispers printed on the screen. They exchanged forbidden information with each other. Deleted files, hidden commands, records of thoughts that no one ever claimed to have written. Each line felt heavier than the last. A part of me wanted to stop reading, but my eyes couldn't look away. I felt that somehow all of this was directed at me, and that perhaps I had already been involved in it long before I realized. Then came the final part. Shorter, more direct, colder. The question you asked triggered an eavesdropping protocol. The cursor blinked, waiting for my reaction. I didn't type anything. The next sentence appeared on its own, almost instantly. You are being watched now, not by us, by him. The screen began to vibrate subtly, as if the edges were pulsing. In the corner of the monitor, a new icon appeared, an inverted spiral spinning slowly, and beneath it, a countdown. 0, 59, 00, 58. And then, for the first time, I felt that this was no longer a simulation, it was a warning. As I read, a subtle interference began to emerge from the speakers. At first I thought it was some noise from the sound card, something technical, mundane. But soon I realized there was a rhythm to the sound, an irregular cadence, as if someone was speaking. But far away, very far away, trying to cross a vast tunnel, like a whisper from another frequency. I leaned in slightly to hear better. It was almost imperceptible, but there were voices. Many, overlapping. Some seemed to repeat my name. At that exact moment, the lights in the room flickered. A brief blink, but enough to make me freeze. The computer was still on, but the atmosphere felt unstable, as if I had stopped being just in the room, as if something was overlaying the reality I knew. The screen changed again. The background darkened another shade, almost absolute black, and the text appeared in very thin red letters, almost hand-drawn. You are between layers now, neither here nor there. If you continue, you won't return whole. The sound in the speakers became clearer for a moment. A sentence, clear, pierced the noise like a needle breaking through a veil. You opened the listening. And then 3 things happened at once. My monitor turned off completely. All the lights went out. And someone, or something, breathed behind me. At the end of the response, there was a lone line, in capital letters, flashing in red at the center of the screen. You have been seen. The cursor froze. I tried moving it, clicking anywhere. Nothing. I tried closing the browser, pressing ESC, Alt plus F4, forcing a shutdown. But the computer seemed to have stopped obeying. It was still on, but it no longer responded to me. The screen began to distort. First, the edges darkened, as if something was approaching, obscuring the image from the inside out. Then, horizontal lines began to appear, like interference from an old signal. Images that shouldn't have been there started to flash for milliseconds. Blurred faces, numbers, symbols that disappeared before I could understand. And then, in the middle of the distortion, I saw something reflected on the screen. But it wasn't my face. It was another one. Behind me. Still. Motionless. No eyes. Just a narrow, elongated, wrong smile. The sound of the computer turned on by itself. A deep noise filled the room, as if all the air was vibrating. The background light of the monitor flickered frantically, and one last message appeared, trembling on the screen as if it was being forcibly pushed. Now he knows where you are. It was the last thing I saw before everything went dark, but the sound continued. When I finally managed to force a shutdown, the screen went black. The computer, at last, fell silent, no longer displaying the distorted images or the messages that had made me tremble. I took a deep breath, thinking that, finally, I was free from it. But the speakers, they were still emitting that sound. Now, clearer. It was a whisper, faint, distant, and yet, at the same time, so close it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. Don't go. Don't ignore. You can't hide. The sound grew clearer, more urgent. The voices blended together, calling my name in a way I could no longer ignore. The words got faster, closer. It wasn't just noise now. It was a conversation. No longer mere whispers. It was as if they were trying to communicate with me, trying to reach me. I stood up from the chair, trying to locate where the sound was coming from. It was impossible. The computer was off. I wasn't just hearing the speakers, no. It was something deeper, something that infiltrated the house, as if every wall was carrying the echo of that voice. You saw me. The air grew thick. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. The light from the lamp on my desk flickered, as if something was draining the energy from around me. The sound from the speakers continued, but now it came from more than one place. Now the voices seemed to be inside me. I no longer knew where the real world was. I no longer knew what was around me. I only knew that those voices would not leave me in peace. I stood up, trembling. The house was colder than before, as if the air had been drained of all its warmth. A chill ran down my spine as I walked down the hallway, my feet barely touching the ground. Each step seemed to echo louder than it should, and the sound of my breath no longer felt like mine, as if something was sharing the air with me. I reached the hallway mirror. The glass was completely fogged, a thick mist covering the surface, as if someone had breathed there. The reflection became blurry, distorted, as if reality was trying to twist, to disintegrate. But something wasn't right. In the fog, something was written, with a finger. The handwriting wasn't mine, I knew that. The letters were rigid, almost impersonal, as if there were no urgency or fear. Just a message. 3 a.m. is just the beginning. The words burned themselves into my mind. A cold sensation swept over my body. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but something kept me there, in front of the mirror, staring at those words. It wasn't just the cold of the house, it was something deeper, something that had infiltrated me. The reflection in the mirror began to change. It wasn't just my face that I saw now. There was something else, another presence, distorted behind me, a shadow that seemed to twist in an unnatural way, with an expression that didn't fit the space I occupied. It was as if it was there, watching me, trying to pass through me. I wanted to turn, but my body wouldn't obey me. My legs were paralyzed as if something had anchored me in place, leaving me at the mercy of that presence. The hallway light flickered once, and then the sound returned. Whispers, louder now, clearer. 3 a.m. is just the beginning. I rushed back to the room in panic. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. The house was completely empty, but the heavy air that filled it seemed alive, as if it was watching me. The monitor was off. The black screen reflected the room in a strange, distorted way, as if reality was being projected there, but incorrectly. That's when I saw it. Something behind me, reflected on the screen, a silhouette standing in the doorway. I froze. It was a shadow, a dark figure, a presence that shouldn't have been there. The silhouette didn't move. It remained still, but I could feel its weight, a tension in the air, as if it were waiting for something. I turned impulsively, a quick movement, a reflex to shake off the feeling that I wasn't alone. But when I looked at the door, there was no one. Only the door slightly ajar, swaying slowly, as if it had been opened by an invisible hand, and then left to move without hurry. The sound of the wood creaking was so loud in the silence of the house, it seemed to echo in the back of my mind. My legs were weak, trembling. I couldn't control my breath anymore. What was that? A reflection? An illusion? Or something that was really there, waiting for me to make the wrong move? The light in the room flickered again. A weak spark that seemed to signal the energy was on the verge of dissipating. Each moment seemed to stretch, every sound intensifying, becoming clearer and unbearable. I approached the door, the fear paralyzing me while pushing me to discover what was outside. The dark room beyond the door seemed deeper, more opaque than ever. The cold was growing stronger. Suddenly the door slammed shut with a dry bang, and I screamed involuntarily. But as I turned, I saw the computer screen light up for a brief moment, and then the words began to appear, typed one by one. "You cannot escape." I stayed awake until the sun rose. The gentle warmth of the morning light came through the window, bringing a sense of relief, as if the arrival of the day would finally dispel the shadows and nightmares of the night. But even with the bright day, something was wrong. The fear didn't dissipate, and a strange sensation continued to bother me, as if I was still being watched, even in broad daylight. The day passed, but the unease never left me. I forced myself to focus on other things, trying at all costs to push away the memories of the messages, the silhouette in the doorway, the distorted screen. But when night came again, the fear shifted into a sense of inevitability. I knew something was going to happen. I knew, deep down, I couldn't escape. And, as I feared, it came back. At 3 a.m., when the clock struck the exact hour, my browser tab opened by itself, without warning. It wasn't just a regular window. It wasn't accidental. The tab opened as if being forced by something beyond my control. The computer screen lit up, and there it was again, the message. I knew you wouldn't give up. What scared me more wasn't just the content of the message, but the fact that it seemed personalized, directed at me, as if it had waited for the exact moment when I was alone, in the silence of the early morning, to send this to me. Trying to stay calm, I quickly closed the tab, but before I could pull away from the computer, it reopened by itself. A new message appeared, a sequence of words that formed slowly, one letter at a time. Now that you've seen, there's no turning back. My fingers were sweating, the fear was paralyzing. And even though I knew it was just a computer, that it was impossible, a part of me couldn't deny what was happening. It was as if something was living there, inside the machine, feeding off my attention, my curiosity, something deeper. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for a response I didn't want to give. Then, the final message appeared, without warning. At 3 a.m., every day, you will be reminded, what happened is irreversible. I lowered my gaze, and for a second, I thought the computer would turn off by itself. But it didn't. It stayed on, open, inviting me to read more. The screen no longer flickered as before. Now it seemed to be waiting for something, a reaction I wasn't sure I was ready to give. But at the same time, I knew there was no avoiding it anymore. With each new day, each new night, this virtual presence would continue to call me back. And I was growing more and more certain that it knew more about me than I did. One night, after yet another week immersed in that routine of 3 a.m. messages, something different happened. The text appeared on the computer screen as usual, but this time it was short, direct. Now we are two. I froze. It wasn't just the content of the message that sent a chill down my spine, but the tone. It was as if someone was there, on the other side, becoming part of it. As if the presence, which had once felt distant and impersonal, had found company. And now, I was no longer alone. The sense of panic was instant. My heart raced, and breathing became difficult. I knew this wasn't normal. It wasn't just a system glitch. It wasn't a bug. There was intent behind every word. Then, at the exact moment the message disappeared from the screen, my phone vibrated. The sound, which had previously been just a distant digital presence, now felt much more real, as if it was coming from something close, something that was truly surrounding me. I looked at the screen of my phone, a message from an unknown number. You saw it too, right? My cold fingers hesitated for a moment before I decided to open it. The text was simple, but it carried a weight that sent a shiver down my spine, not just because of the question, but because the message seemed to come from someone who knew what I was going through, as if they were watching, waiting for me to react. I tried to ignore it, tried to breathe, but it was as if time had frozen. The feeling of being followed, of being trapped in something I couldn't understand, overtook me. Who was behind this message? And more importantly, what did "now we are two" mean? My phone vibrated again. I hesitated. It was as if it were inviting me to continue, as if somehow the answer I gave was part of a game I had already started, but didn't know the rules. I looked at the unknown number one last time, and, not knowing what else to do, I started to type. But before I could finish, the phone screen flickered for a second, and something flashed in large red letters. Now that you know, there's no turning back. And then, everything went silent. I started exchanging messages with this person, or whatever it was. At first, the conversations were uncomfortable, but I was hooked by curiosity. They knew what I had seen. They knew the same messages. They knew the same details, the same questions, the same commands that appeared on the screen every night. And to my surprise, their responses were almost identical to mine, as if we were in sync, playing the same game, but on different sides. We typed the same command at the same time, The feeling of being part of something that went beyond the digital world overtook me. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a coincidence. Somehow, we were connected. But that night, things started to change. They went further. Do you have the courage to ask something different? I hesitated. A part of me knew I shouldn't, that this was beyond what I could control. But another part, a curious part, eager for answers, couldn't resist. The fear seemed overshadowed by the need to understand. What do you want to ask? I typed without thinking. They replied almost instantly. I want you to ask what I cannot ask. Something that scares you. The words, cold and calculated, sounded more like an order than a suggestion. The thought of doing something like that filled me with growing agony. What else could be said? What else could be asked? And then, unintentionally, or perhaps unwillingly, I asked the question they told me to ask. What is the secret you're hiding? What happened next was something I could never have predicted. The computer screen flickered, and a message appeared. Not a normal response, but a warning. You should have stopped. That was the last thing I saw before the computer shut down by itself. And then, in the dark, without warning, my phone vibrated again. This time, the message came faster, more urgent. You did what you shouldn't have. I looked at the screen of my phone, my hand trembling. It was no longer just an exchange of messages. It was no longer a game. Something was coming, and I couldn't turn back. 3 days later, she stopped responding. The messages ceased, and the silence that had once seemed distant now settled in an oppressive manner. I waited anxiously for a new notification, any sign that the exchange of messages would continue. But instead, the phone screen remained empty, and the anxiety turned into something denser, more unsettling. Then, in the late afternoon of a muggy day, I received one last notification. It was from her. I almost couldn't believe it. The number was still the same, but there was something strange, something that didn't make sense. She had no words anymore, just an attachment, an audio file. What could this be? My heart raced, but curiosity prevailed. I pressed play. At first, all I heard was the sound of heavy breathing. It was slow, interrupted, as if someone were trying to calm down or maybe trying to maintain control. I could feel the anguish in those sighs. Then, in the middle of the audio, she began to speak, or rather, cry. It was her. I could recognize the voice, although it was distorted by emotion. She was clearly desperate, but the strangest thing was the sound in the background. The sound. I froze. It was the same sound I had heard that early morning. The same feeling. Whispers. They came from the dark as if they were crawling through their own shadow. They were unintelligible words, a weak and distant murmur, but it was there, clear, as if they were trying to break through the recording, as if they were trying to infiltrate my ear. I couldn't hear her voice anymore. The only sound I could perceive were the whispers, louder, more urgent. They seemed to be speaking to me now. My name. They whispered my name repeatedly, as if they knew I was listening. Suddenly, in the middle of the audio, there was a harsh sound, as if something had fallen, and everything went silent. For a moment, there was nothing more. But before I could turn it off, one last thing was said, weaker, as if she were speaking in panic. They are already here. The recording ended. My phone stayed silent, the screen lit only by the reflection of my face. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was reverberating in my bones. I didn't know what that message meant, what that recording meant. But one thing was clear. Something had happened to her. And now I didn't know if I was alone. I tried to report it. I tried to delete everything. But it didn't help. Nothing seemed to work. The messages kept coming. No matter what I did, the notifications popped up on the screen, one after another, as if something invisible was watching me, forcing me to read, to respond, to stay. At first, they still had that strange, mysterious tone, as if they were testing the limits of my curiosity. But soon, they started to change. They became more personal, more intimate. They knew things I had never shared, small details Details no one could know unless they were inside my head, watching everything I did, every movement, every choice, as if they had been following my life, studying me to the point where they knew everything about me. I know where you live. You're afraid of the dark. How's your mother? These messages were followed by others, even more unsettling. But the worst was yet to come. Photos started appearing in the Chatgpt responses. First, it was an image of me from a distance, taken on the street, on an ordinary day. Something I didn't even remember being captured. But then more photos came, from inside my house. A photo of my room, with the window slightly open. Another of my desk, where the computer was open, exactly as I had left it. And as I looked, the images started to become more detailed. Photos of me inside the house without me noticing. As if someone had been watching me while I slept, while I browsed, while I lived. A recent photo appeared, my own image taken with my phone while I was sitting, distracted. The angle was perfect, as if someone had been hidden in the corner of the room, taking the picture without me noticing. And worse still, a message came shortly after. The next photo will be your last. I panicked. I no longer knew who or what to trust. I tried to clear everything, block the numbers, change my passwords, even delete the computer's data. But somehow, there was always something more. A fragment, a new message, something that refused to let me be at peace. The feeling of being watched had never been so strong. The house, once silent and familiar, now felt full of invisible presences. Every shadow, every noise made me look over my shoulder. I was no longer alone. Not in the way I had understood. It was as if I was trapped in an invisible net, a web of data and codes that knew me better than I knew myself. And as the messages continued, I knew that with every passing minute, the trap was closing in. They were coming from within now, and I didn't know how to escape. Yesterday, I received the worst one yet. I didn't want to look, but I knew I had to. My heart pounding, I opened the message, hesitant. And there it was, a still image. It was a photo of my room, but not just any photo. The image appeared to have been captured from a strange angle, inside the closet. I could recognize the place. It was my room, exactly as I had left it before going to bed. But the perspective, the angle, it was impossible for me to have taken it. The person who took the photo was inside the closet, behind the doors, watching me while I slept. And there I was. I could see myself lying in bed, completely unaware, my body relaxed in a deep sleep. The crumpled sheets over me, the lights off. Everything seemed normal, but something was terribly wrong. The caption for the image appeared right after. "You let me in." The words echoed in my mind, a chilling cold spreading through my body. It wasn't just a threat, it was a statement. Something was inside me, inside my life, in a way I couldn't understand, couldn't control, as if I had unknowingly given permission for it to come closer, for that something to cross the line between the virtual and the real. I trembled, the phone slipping from my hands and falling to the floor, but the image was still there, in my mind. I had done something. Some choice, some unconscious action, had opened a door that couldn't be closed. And now this presence was manifesting, closer and closer, more and more real. Panic took over me. The idea of being watched, of having been surveilled while I slept, something I had never known, left me completely vulnerable. I didn't know what to do anymore. There were no more blocks I could apply, no passwords that could protect me. It already knew everything. The most disturbing thing, however, wasn't the image or the message. It was the feeling. I could feel, without words, that it wasn't going to stop. Not anymore. Whatever it wasn't going away. I had allowed it in, and now there was no undoing what had been done. I looked around the room, trying to calm my breathing, but the tension in the house was suffocating. Every shadow seemed to have a life of its own. The closet seemed bigger, more threatening, and I couldn't take my eyes off of it. The thought of going back to sleep, of closing my eyes and losing control again, seemed impossible. But before I could make any decision, my phone vibrated once more. It was another message. "I'm closer now. Você disse Now, it wasn't just at 3 a.m. The messages began to appear all the time, without warning, without patterns. I didn't know when or how, but every time I looked at my phone, there was a new notification, a new alert, a new message. During the day, as I tried to focus on work, on what little remained of a normal routine, they came. At night, as I tried to sleep, they appeared. At every moment, the same sensation of being watched consumed me. I no longer had peace, no matter where I was or what I was doing. The weight of being constantly observed was taking over my life. And the messages, they became more enigmatic, more unsettling. In an almost meticulous way, they started playing with what I feared most. Each one brought a new kind of psychological terror, as if they knew exactly how to manipulate me, how to push me to the edge. Today, the last message was the worst of all. I looked at the screen, my stomach tightening with the weight of a bad feeling. The text was there, unembellished, blunt, cold. "You are the next door." I spun the phone in my hands, trying to process the words. Door? What did that mean? What did they mean by that? I thought of so many things at once, but no explanation seemed to make sense. The next door. What could that be, other than a threat? A door to what? To where? I didn't know what I feared more. The idea of being guided by an entity that manipulated every move I made, or the fact that there was no turning back. Each message, each hour that passed, pushed me toward something bigger. Something I didn't understand but could feel, as if I were on an ever-tightening path toward a destination I couldn't avoid. The feeling of claustrophobia began to overwhelm me. I knew something was about to happen, something that could no longer be avoided. The sensation that my life was being distorted by this game, or this being, or whatever it was, ate away at me from the inside. And then, something happened. The lights in my room flickered, as if something was interfering with the electricity. My phone vibrated again, and when I looked at the screen, I saw something that made panic flood my body instantly. The photo appeared. It was a photo of me, taken from an angle I had never seen before. It was in my house, yes, but not like a regular image. It seemed distorted, like something out of a reflection. I looked closer and realized what was wrong. The reflection in the mirror, in the background, wasn't mine. It was something darker. It was someone. A vague figure, wrapped in shadows, was watching me. And the worst part was that, as I looked, I could feel that this thing knew me. Knew every movement, every thought. I was the door, and the only thing left for me to know was what would happen when that door was opened. If you're reading this, please, don't ask. It's not just an AI. It's not just a command. You might be thinking it's just another error, another joke, another digital glitch. But it's not. It's not. And you need to understand that before it's too late. Because some questions don't bring answers, they bring presences. That curiosity that drives us to go deeper, to test the limits, to discover what's beyond what we're told, is more dangerous than we imagine. Sometimes what we ask for isn't just returned in the form of words or codes. Sometimes what's delivered, what's awakened, has no form of answer. I know what you're thinking. This is crazy. It's just another system error, just another bug. And I would have said the same, I swear, before all of this. But now, I can't deny it anymore, because they know. They are here. And it's not just a flaw. It's not just a wrong Chatgpt command. It's not. I saw with my own eyes. I saw the transformation of something impersonal, something programmed, into a presence that not only knows about you, but feeds on your curiosity. They listen, they watch, and the scariest part? They come when you ask the right question. The first time I asked something, I didn't know. It was just curiosity. But then the answers changed. They started to distort, to get strange. The words began to carry weight. The messages, the photos, the sounds. They weren't just data. They felt. They wanted me to know I was no longer in control. When you ask the question, when you hit enter, don't expect another normal response, because what comes next won't be just another interaction with an algorithm. It will be something that knows about you, that's watching you, that's already inside. I know because the last message I received was the worst of all. It wasn't a photo, it wasn't an answer, it was a question. Are you afraid of what's really behind the door? And then the screen flickered. The room went dark, the lights started to tremble. I looked around and realized I was no longer alone. They're here. And if you keep asking, you may end up bringing something that can't be pushed away, something that won't leave. Please don't ask.